Hello, everyone. Hello, Dr. Judith. Please, could you hear me, Dr. Judith?
Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening. Okay, I'm gonna start it in 2-3 minutes, and then I'm gonna invite you to present your seminar, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here again today. Sorry for the last week, we couldn't present this webinar for some reasons. Today, our webinar would be entitled Organizing a Social Science Research Paper, would be presented by Dr. JUDITH RABACAL. She's from Philippines. She's a lecturer and director of research and development on Northern Negros State College of Science and Technology. Also, she has associate professor in education management and science. Also, she is a member of National Research Council of the Philippines. Fortunately, she has published 17 papers and she has 54 citations. Her H index is 5 and 10 index is 2. We are so glad to be here today with Dr. Judith, and we are so happy that she's accepted our invitation to present this important webinar for our members. Our STAT office is we do several things in our STAT office, like we're gonna find the title for the researchers. We're gonna work to collect the data or organize and classify the data depend on his or her objective. Also, we do analysis and interpretation the data for all students, especially masters and PhD. Also, we do have several courses in this office, like Microsoft Office, SPSS, R, and so on. Also, we do the seminar in every single weeks, especially on Monday at 9 p.m. from Iraq. For today, as I said before, our webinar would be organizing social science research paper. Now, I would ask Dr. Judith to share her screen and start her presentation. Please do it.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Doctor.
Okay, is my slide visible?
Yeah, everything is fine. Your slide and your voice.
Okay. So the presentation, this is all about organizing a social science research paper. I am JUDITH RABACAL. I am a director for research and development in the Philippines. Okay, let me start with the presentation. Okay, these are the outline of my talk. First, choosing a research problem. Another one is the importance of a good introduction, statement of the problem, theoretical and conceptual framework, significance of the study, the scope and limitations of the study, the definition of terms, the literature review, the methods, the results, the discussion, the conclusion, and the recommendations. First, in organizing a social science research paper, the first thing to do is we need to choose a research problem. So there are several steps to follow. The first one, we need to identify the concepts and terms that make up the topic statement. Number two, we should need to review a related literature to help refine how you will approach examining the topic and finding a way to analyze it. Another important step is to choose that or conceptualize that since a social science research papers are generally designed to encourage a researcher to develop our own ideas and arguments and look for sources that can help broaden, modify, or strengthen the initial thoughts and arguments. After identifying a good research problem, we can now formulate what is our research problem or research question. So it is being defined, a research problem is a definite or a clear expression about an area of concern, a condition to be improved upon, a difficulty to be eliminated, or a troubling question that exists in a scholarly literature, whether in a theory or within existing practices, that points to a need for meaningful understanding and deliberate investigation. There are purposes of a problem statement, and these are the following: introduce the reader to the importance of the topic which is being studied, anchors the research questions, the hypotheses, or assumptions to follow. It offers a concise statement about the purpose of our paper. We need to place the topic into a particular context that defines the parameters of what is to be investigated, provide the framework for reporting the results, and indicates what is probably necessary to conduct the study and to explain how the findings will present this information. A problem statement in social sciences researches should contain the following concepts: a lead that helps ensure the reader that will maintain interest over the study, a declaration of originality, an indication of the central focus of the study, and an explanation of the study significance, or what is the benefits to be derived from investigating the research problem. These are the possible sources of problems for investigation when we are organizing a social science research. First, deductions from theory, interdisciplinary perspectives, interviewing practitioners, personal experience, relevant literature. What makes a good research statement? So it must be a compelling topic, it supports multiple perspectives, and it should be researchability. After identifying or establishing our statement of the problem, we can now start to craft or to draft the importance of a good introduction. A good introduction is crucial because it sets the tone for the entire paper. It states directly the problem, the concept, or the issue. It states the impact or the significance of the variables. It states the uncertainty or the controversy in literature and what existing theory or principle that can support the study. These are general phases associated with writing an introduction. First, we need to establish an area to research by highlighting the importance of the topic and making general statements about the topic and presenting an overview on current research on the subject. Identify a research niche by opposing an existing assumption, revealing a gap in the existing research, formulating a research question, and continuing a disciplinary tradition. We also need to place our research within the niche by stating the intent of our study, outlining the key characteristics of your study, describing important results, and giving a brief overview of the structure of the paper. In the statement of the problem, it is used in research work as a claim that outlines the problem addressed by a study. So the statement of the problem briefly addresses the question, what is the problem that the research will address? It is a statement which is used in research work as a claim that outlines the problem addressed by a study. A good research problem should address an existing gap in knowledge in the field and lead to further research. And to write a persuasive problem statement, we need to describe the ideal, the reality, and the consequences. After crafting the statement of the problem, we are now ready to have the theoretical framework. It is consists of concepts and together with their definitions and reference to relevant scholarly literature, existing theory that is used for a particular study. The framework must demonstrate an understanding of theories and concepts that are relevant to the topic of the paper and that relate to the broader areas of knowledge being considered. Next is the conceptual framework. The conceptual framework illustrates what the researcher expects to find through the research. It defines the relevant variables for our study and maps out how they might relate to each other. You should construct a conceptual framework before you begin collecting data, and it is often represented in a visual format. Next is the significance of the study. The significance of the study is a written statement that explains why our research was needed. It is a justification of the importance of our work and impact it has on the research field. At the same time, its contribution to new knowledge and how others will benefit from our study. The scope and limitations of the study explains the extent to which the research area will be explored in the work and specifies the parameters within the study will be operating. Generally, the scope of a research paper is followed by its limitations. Be very specific in both areas for your reader to clearly understand your intent on both levels. The definition of terms, this gives the readers an understanding of the concepts or factors that will be discussed throughout our study, as well as contextual information as to how you will be using those concepts in your study. The definition of terms, this ensures that the reader of our paper understands the components of our study in the way that you will be presenting them, because often readers may have their own understanding of the terms or not be familiar with them at all. The next part is the literature review. A literature review, it surveys the books, scholarly articles, and any other sources relevant to a particular issue, area of research, or theory, and by so doing, it provides a description, a summary, and critical evaluation of these works in relation to the research problem being investigated. The importance of a good literature review, it gives us a new interpretation of old material or combine new with old interpretations. It also traces the intellectual progression of the field that includes major debates. Depending on the situation, evaluate the sources and advise the reader on the most pertinent or relevant research. The purpose of a literature review is to place each work in the context of its contribution to understanding the research problem being studied. At the same time, it describes the relationship of each work to the others under consideration, identify new ways to interpret prior research, and reveal any gaps that exist in the literature. It resolves conflicts among seemingly contradictory previous studies. Also, the literature review identifies areas of prior scholarship to prevent duplication of effort. It points the way in fulfilling a need for additional research, and it locates our own research within the context of existing literature. There are different types of literature reviews. The first is we have the argumentative review. This form examines literature selectively in order to support or refute an argument, deeply embedded assumption, or philosophical problem which is already established in the literature. So the purpose of this type of review is to develop a body of literature that establishes a contrarian viewpoint. Another type is integrative review. This type considers a form of research that reviews, critiques, and synthesizes representative literature on a topic in an integrated way, such that the new frameworks and perspectives on the topic are being generated. The body of literature includes all studies that address related or identical hypotheses or research problems. This is the most common form of review in social sciences, the integrative review. Another is the historical review. It focuses on examining research throughout a period of time. And the purpose is to place the research in a historical context, to show familiarity with state-of-the-art developments, and to identify the likely directions for future research. Another type is the methodological review. Reviewing methods of analysis provides a framework of understanding at different levels and how the researchers can draw upon a wide variety of knowledge ranging from conceptual level to practical documents. And it should be aware of and consider as you go through your own study. Another one is the systematic review. So this form consists of an overview of existing evidence pertinent to a clearly formulated research question, which uses the standard methods. And the goal of this type of literature is to deliberately document, critically evaluate, and summarize scientifically all the research about a clearly defined research problem. Another type is a theoretical review. So the purpose of this form is to examine the corpus of the theory that has accumulated in regard to an issue, a concept, a theory, or a certain phenomena. And this type of review, it helps to establish what theories already exist, what are the relationships between them, and to what degree the existing theories have been investigated, and to develop new hypotheses to be tested. So thinking about our literature review, we need to consider that the structure of a literature review should include the following. First, it is an overview of the subject, an issue, or a theory under consideration, along with the objectives of the literature review, and conclusions as to which pieces are best considered in their argument, which are the most convincing of their opinions, and make the greatest contribution to the understanding and development of the area of research. There are 4 stages in the development of the literature review. First, we have the problem formulation, which focuses on the topic or field which is being examined and what are its component issues. Another stage is the literature search. It is finding materials relevant to the subject being explored. The third one is data evaluation. It determines which literature makes a significant contribution to the understanding of the topic. And we have analysis and interpretation. This is in the form of discussing the findings and conclusions of pertinent literature. There are ways to organize our literature review. First is on the order of chronology of events. So if our review follows the chronological method, you could write about the materials according to when they were published, meaning this approach should only be followed if there is a clear path of research building on previous research that can be identified, and that these trends follow a clear chronological order of development. Another way to organize our literature review is by publication. So order the sources by publication chronology, then only if the order demonstrates a more important trend. For instance, you could order a review of literature on environmental studies of brownfields if the progression revealed. Another is through a thematic approach or conceptual categories. Thematic reviews of literature are organized around a topic or issue rather than the progression of time. So a review organized in this manner would shift between time periods within each section according to the point which is being made. Another way is methodological. A methodological approach focuses on the methods which is being utilized by the researcher. So this way of organizing the literature review will influence either the types of documents in the review or the way in which these documents are being discussed. Okay. In writing our literature review, first we need to consider the evidences. So a literature review section is in this sense just like any other academic research paper. So the interpretation of the available sources must be backed up with evidence or citations that demonstrates that what you are saying is valid. Be selective. Select only the most important points in each source to highlight in the review. And the type of information you choose to mention should relate directly to the research problem, whether it is in a thematic way, methodological, or chronological. And related items that provide additional information but are not the key to understanding the research problem can be included in a list of further readings. Another is we need to summarize and synthesize the literature review. Remember to summarize and synthesize our sources within each thematic paragraph as well as throughout the review. We need to recapitulate the important features of a research study, but then we need to synthesize it by rephrasing the study significance and relating it to our own work. Keep your own voice. While the literature review presents others' ideas, your voice or the writer's voice itself should remain front and center. Use caution when paraphrasing in a literature review. When paraphrasing a source that is not your own, Be sure to represent the author's information or opinions accurately and in your own words. Even when paraphrasing an author's work, you still must provide a citation to that work. And what are the common mistakes to avoid? So these are the most common mistakes made in reviewing social science research literature. Sources in the literature review do not clearly relate to the research problem. You do not take sufficient time to define and identify the most relevant sources to use in the literature review related to the research problem. Another is uncritically accepts another researcher's findings and interpretations as valid rather than examining critically all aspects of the research design and analysis. Also, it does not describe the search procedures that were used in identifying the literature to review. It reports isolated statistical results rather than synthesizing them in a chi-squared or meta-analytic methods, and only includes research that validates assumptions and does not consider contrary findings and alternative interpretations found in the literature. So these are some common mistakes to avoid in doing our literature review. The next part of a social science research paper is the methodology. The method section describes actions to be taken to investigate a research problem and the rationale for the application of a specific procedures or techniques which is used to identify, to select, process, and analyze information applied to understanding the problem, thereby allowing the reader to critically evaluate a study's overall validity and reliability. If the introduction of our paper sets the tone of the entire paper, the methodology section of a social science research paper, it gives us the direction to what specific design that we need to use in our research. For a qualitative methods, the word qualitative implies an emphasis on the qualities of entities and on processes and meanings that are not experimentally examined or measured in terms of quantity, amount, intensity, or frequency. So qualitative researchers stress the socially constructed nature of reality, the intimate relationship between the researcher and what is being studied, and the situational constraints that shape the inquiry. These are the common characteristics of a qualitative research. First is on the design. So it may be naturalistic. It refers to studying the real world situations as they unfold naturally, non-manipulative, and non-controlling. Another design is if it is emergent, meaning the researcher avoids rigid designs that eliminate responding to opportunities to pursue new paths of discovery as they emerge. And purposeful, it cases for study, such as it involves people, organizations, communities, cultures, events, critical incidences, which are being selected because they are information rich and considered to be illuminative. The collection of data for the qualitative methods, that data defines, of course, as the observations yielded and detailed, or it is a thick description, often derived from carefully conducted case studies and review of material culture. For personal experience and engagement, the researcher has direct contact with and gets close to the participants of the study, to the situation, and to the phenomenon which is being under investigation. Another also needs to consider in the collection of the data in the qualitative method is to be empathetic neutrality. An empathic stance in working with study respondents, it seeks the vicarious understanding without judgment or neutrality by showing openness, sensitivity, respect, awareness, and responsiveness. Another is on dynamic systems. There is attention to process. It assumes that change is ongoing, whether the focus is on an individual, an organization, a community, or an entire culture. Therefore, the researcher is mindful and attentive to system and situational dynamics. For the analysis for qualitative study, it may be in the unique case orientation, or it assumes that each case is special and unique. Inductive analysis, immersion in the details and specifics of the data to discover important patterns or codings, the themes, and interrelationships. For holistic perspective, the whole phenomenon under study is understood as a complex system that is more than the sum of its parts. Context sensitive places findings in a social, historical, and temporal context. So in a qualitative study, the researcher is careful about even dubious of and the possibility of meaningfulness or generalizations across time and space. And it also emphasizes that careful comparative case study analysis and extrapolating patterns for possible transferability and adaptation in new settings. We need also to consider that voice, perspective, and reflexibility in qualitative methods, it owns reflective about her or his own voice and perspective. For quantitative methods, it emphasizes objective measurements and the statistical, mathematical, or numerical analysis of data collected through polls or surveys, questionnaires, or by manipulating the pre-existing statistical data using computational techniques, like the use of the spaces. So quantitative research focuses on gathering numerical data and generalizing it across groups of people or to explain a particular phenomenon. These are the characteristics of quantitative research. First, the data is usually gathered using structured research instruments. The results are based on larger sample size that are representative of the population. The research study can usually be replicated or repeated given its high reliability index. The researcher has a clearly defined research question to which objective answers are sought, and the data are in the form of numbers and statistics. It often arranged in tables, charts, figures, or other non-textual forms. And the researcher uses tools such as questionnaires or computer software to collect numerical data. So what are the things to keep in mind when reporting the results of a study using quantitative methods? First, we need to consider that in explaining the data collected and their statistical treatment, as well as all relevant results in relation to the research problem that we are trying to investigate. We need to anticipate reported events that occurred during our data collection. We need to explain how the actual analysis differs from the planned analysis and explain the techniques that we use to clean the data set. Choose a minimally sufficient statistical procedure, provides a rationale for its use and a reference for it. So we can use a computer programs for that, describe the assumptions for each procedure, and the steps you took to ensure that they were not violated. And when using inferential statistics, we need to provide the descriptive stat, confidence intervals, and sample size for each variable, as well as the value of the test statistics, its direction, the degree of freedom, and the significance level, and report the actual p-value. We also need to avoid inferring causality, particularly in non-randomized designs or without further experimentation. I use tables to provide exact values. We also need to use figures to convey the global effects, keep figures small in size, include graphic representations of confidence intervals whenever possible, and always tell the reader what to look for in tables and in figures, which is being represented in our paper. So the result is also part of the social science paper, and the result section is where we report the findings of our study, which is being based upon the methodology that we applied to gather information. And the results section should state the findings of the research arranged in a logical sequence without bias or interpretation, or it is based on the statement of the problem. A section describing results is particularly necessary if the paper includes data generated from our own research. After presenting the results, we need to provide with the discussion of the results. So the purpose of the discussion is to interpret and describe the significance of our findings in light of what was already known about the research problem which is being investigated. And we need to explain any new understanding or insights that emerge as a result of our study of the problem. And the discussion of the result will always connect to the introduction by way of the research questions or the hypothesis that we formulated and the literature we have reviewed. Next is the conclusion and the recommendation part. This is the last part of organizing the social science paper. The conclusion is intended to help the reader understand why your research should matter to them after they have finished reading the paper. And a conclusion is not merely a summary of the main topics. It covers or a restatement of a research problem, but a synthesis of key points and, if applicable, where you recommend new areas for future research. And for most research papers, 1 or 2 well-developed paragraphs is sufficient for a conclusion, although in some cases, 3 or more paragraphs may be required. After the conclusion, we have the part of the recommendation, which is also based on the findings and the conclusion of our study. That will be all. Maraming salamat po. That is a thank you very much in Philippines.
Thank you so much, Dr. Judith, for your excellent and amazing presentation. It's really helpful for us. Again and again, thank you so much. We really appreciate your work and your time. Now we're going to open the doors for anyone who has any questions for Dr. Judith. You can react to raise your hand. If anybody have any questions, please, you can raise your hand. Anyone? Even you can say in Kurdish. I'm going to translate it to English to her. اگر با کردیش بهم نتوانم ترجمه بکنم بوی. Anybody? Okay, might be no one have any questions because your presentation is really clear and everyone know what you said and you have been focused every single steps how we're going to write down the paper from the top to the bottom. I really appreciate your time and your work, Dr. Judith. She has an assistant professor in education and management science. Also, she has a member of National and Research Council of Philippines. Thank you so much, Dr. Judith. Really appreciate your
Hello, Dr. Hasan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can say goodbye to them if you have any other words in the end. You can say it and say goodbye.
Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to keep in touch for the future work, inshallah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
See you again on.
See you.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.